In a world where vampires, demons, homunculus, and other mythical creatures have been hunted down or exploited to the brink of destruction, a place called Itogomi Island exists where a safe haven between the humans and all other mythical creatures has been established. There is peace between all races, but not for long because that's how our anime begins. Kojou Akatsuki was once a normal boy, but now he has somehow transformed into a vampire who gets his bloodlust as soon as he gets horny. Kinda weird to have that perk, but it is what it is. Kojou is not just a regular vampire, however. He is said to be the fourth progenitor, one of the 4 immortal vampires that rule the world. However, he doesn't seem to care about his status, and not many people know of it either. Kojou just wants to have a simple life in this chaotic world, but soon his whole world is going to turn upside down. After having lunch with his friends, Kojou heads out in broad daylight. Apparently, not even sunlight can do anything to him. He walks swiftly when he realizes that he is being followed by someone. He tries to go into the mall and escape into the crowd, but the person following him gets to him regardless. It's a girl, Yukina, who calls him the fourth progenitor. His cover was blown, but Kojou had a plan. He starts splurting out random Italian words that make no sense to pass as an Italian, but no one, not even you guys, would be fooled by his Japanese accented Italian. Despite this, the lad somehow manages to escape Yukina's clutches and races outside, only to stop when 2 full-grown men start harassing Yukina as she follows him. The men start doing extremely sus things with Yukina without her consent, and this could lead to only one thing: a solid punch from the lady that sends the men flying. Turns out, the men were actually vampires, and they start flexing around their own demonic power by calling in their familiar for help in the middle of the street. Unlucky for those guys, Yukina is a badass who pulls out a literal magic spear from her back and counters their every move. Kojou watches from afar as Yukina's moves go from violent to deadly and jumps in to save the 2 degenerates from being killed. Yukina leaves soon after, but she accidentally drops her purse, which Kojou gathers to find out that she studied in his high school. That's right, guys, Kojou was in high school because without a high school setting, an anime cannot exist. When Kojou takes the purse to his school to return it, he meets up with Yukina again, and this time they have a proper meeting. The girl introduces herself and tells him that she was a Sword Shaman from the Lion King organization and was sent to the island to observe him and his activities. Kojou is confused as he was just a normal kid, but it seems like his powers as a progenitor have spread across the world, which made him a threat to world peace. She asks him why he was chosen by the last 4th progenitor, Clayky Blood, as her heir, but Kojou cannot seem to remember anything, and whenever he tries, his head hurts like crazy. The whole explanation seems pretty sus to me, but Yukina lets it pass. So, it turns out that the whole world was tied to peace by the treaty between the 3 progenitors who had agreed to maintain friendly relations between the humans and the other races. However, the 4th progenitor was bound by no such law and had always been a matter of concern for the rest of the world. So, the leaders at the Lion King organization had sent Yukina with a really powerful weapon to kill the 4th progenitor if she thought he was a threat. If I know any anime logic, that is not going to happen. After enrolling herself in Kojou's school as a new transfer student, Yukina takes it one more step further by taking the apartment room right next to Kojou's so that she can keep an eye out for him at all times. The literal zero privacy that Kojou had earlier was also now revoked. Kojou, however, is still not sure about this sus Lion King organization. He thinks, and probably correctly, that Lion King is a movie. So he goes to check about this with his teacher, Natsuki, who is one of the few humans who knows his secret. Natsuki, who can barely pass as more than 12, is apparently 26, or in simpler terms, a lolly, is an attack mage and an extremely competent teacher. She tells him that the Lion King organization is the natural enemy of the 4th progenitor and was created to destroy him and bring balance, and she warns Kojou to stay away from anyone even remotely related to it. However, Kojou, being the simp that he is already going on shopping sprees with Yukina. That night, as he is heading out to get some fresh air, Yukina barges out from her room. She had come out mid-bath so that she could accompany him as she had to observe his actions at all times. As the two go out and start playing on a vending machine, they get caught by Natsuki, but before the underage teacher could see their faces, they escape when an explosion in the middle of the city distracts them. When the duo gets away at a distance, they notice that the explosion was caused by one of the vampire familiars. It was a phoenix in the middle of the town causing havoc. Yukina tells Kojou to stay behind while she goes to investigate the area. There, she was hoping to meet the phoenix and its master. However, she watches in horror as a homunculus familiar eats the whole phoenix and absorbs its power into itself. From the shadows, Rudolf Eustache, a European exorcist, makes his anime villain entrance and introduces himself and his homunculus Astarte. He gives no further details, like a class villain would, and instead goes to battle the shaman. Yukina casts her defense spell and goes into battle herself, and so Rudolf calls for help from his homunculus. Astarte is way too powerful for Yukina to handle, and it is immediately apparent as even with her full defense spell, she cannot perceive the second shot. However, just then, Kojou comes to her rescue. He was no coward and had decided to join the battle. Rudolf recognizes Kojou as the fourth progenitor, but still orders Astarte to strike the man. With a blow of her massive fists, Astarte manages to wound Kojou. The boy starts bleeding after the very first strike he is dealt with, but as soon as blood pours from him, a lightning bolt starts to appear from within his body, and soon everything goes dark. The next day, Kojou and Yukina are in school. Apparently, they were able to save themselves after all, but it turns out that the massive power that Kojou had revealed yesterday had caused the government over 50 million yen to fix and repair. Almost 20,000 houses had lost electricity, and 10,000 of these houses still didn't have their power back. Everyone knew that Kojou couldn't control his power, but they didn't know just how incompetent the boy was. Kojou then reveals that since he had never fed on the blood of a normal human and lived as a vampire, he was not able to control his powers at all, and he intended to be a normal human as long as he could. The issue with the Randolph guy was not over yet though, and to top it off, he is the combat deacon of Lothar-Nagia, who is a hotshot known for disturbing peace among the humans and other races. A serial vampire killer, that's what he was, and him being here in Itogami meant trouble. So the two decide to get where he was hiding and deal with him before he caused more issues. In order to track down the companies owned in Japan by Lotharingia, Rudolf's home country, Kojou asks help from his friend Asagi, who also has a crush on him. She was a programmer at the Itogami Management Corporation, a government office of the island which kept data on everything. Asagi helps them find the one factory that Lotharingia owned in Japan. The factory is actually a homunculus research factory. Just how uncanny can it get? The factory had been closed for some time now, but the homunculus modification factory inside there still existed. The duo reach there and start scouring the place, only to find that there was not just one, but over 100 homunculus that Rudolf was working on. Here's the reason Kojou was pissed. Apparently, humans are fused with familiars to make homunculus, and these creatures can barely survive more than a few months because they cannot contain the familiars for longer than that. Once again, Rudolf approaches from the shadow with not a care in the world about what he was doing. He claims to have come to the island for gaining some treasure that was buried within, and immediately orders Astarte to attack them with her full force without any further explanations. This time once more, Rudolf and Astarte have the upper hand despite Yukina and Kojou working together, as earlier Rudolf had managed to memorize the spell that Yukina had used. The man had incorporated the spell into his homunculus, making it invincible. Rudolf then steps down and picks up his sword to kill Yukina, when suddenly Kojou steps in between the blow and takes it upon himself. Rudolf shows no mercy and decapitates Kojou right before Yukina's eyes. With the progenitor dead, Rudolf makes the big mistake and leaves Yukina alive as he heads to the Itogami Management Corporation and advances to the core of the island's magical foundations. Soon enough, Kojou wakes up. As I told you guys earlier, he was a vampire who could walk in the sun, which meant that he was basically immortal in a sense. Yukina explains that his blood started to go back into his body and his head attached back, and soon he was alive and she had wasted her tears. But there was no time left for banter, and Kojou calls Asagi once more to find out what exactly was the treasure that Rudolf was talking about. Asagi illegally gets access to the restricted files and realizes that there was something in the magical foundations of the island. Before the duo can leave to pursue Rudolf once more, Yukina offers her blood to Kojou so that he can transform into a true vampire and use his powers. Kojou is reluctant at first, but he has no choice considering the situation they were in. So he hugs Yukina, because, for some reason, he needs to get horny before he can feed on blood. Then, with one bite, he sucks some of Yukina's blood from her neck. Elsewhere, Rudolph and his homunculus enter the Foundation with explosions happening left and right. They were making a grand villain appearance. The relic, aka treasure, Rudolph was walking about turns out to be a hand of a saint from Rudolph's church. Apparently, this relic was the reason that the island had stability, as it was a sacrifice given to the heretical god, according to Rudolph, who helped the designer build the island. Rudolph wanted to exact revenge by taking the relic with him, which would make the island crumble and fall, killing millions living there. However, our heroes cannot have that, and with the newfound power, actually, the old power that Kojou can now control, the two beat up Rudolph and his homunculus. They don't kill them, however, because heroes are always good for some reason. Kojou uses one of the familiars under his control to beat the villain with a single shot, and even uses his powers to make sure that Astarte would survive by taking the familiar fused with her under his control. Later that day, Yukina is packing her stuff and getting ready to leave when Kojou comes to ask why she was doing so. Apparently, Yukina thinks she had failed her purpose by befriending Kojou instead of observing and perhaps killing him, but soon she gets a package with her broken weapon fixed, which makes her believe that she was meant to stay back a little while longer. Elsewhere in Itogami, therianthropic sympathizers of the Black Death Emperor faction terrorist organization begin to operate within the city. However, they do not realize that Itogami is filled with people who seem to have a hero complex, as this time Natsumi, the attack mage, comes to thwart their plans. She is revealed to be the Witch of the Void, but we don't know what that means just yet, so let's just ignore it as she beats up the monster and ties him up for the cops to take in the following day. Natsuki also manages to figure out that the terrorists were after a long-lost weapon called the Nalakuvera. Back at their school, students prepare for the upcoming Saikai Academy Ball Sports Tournament, and Asagi is paired with Kojou for the badminton event. As Kojou heads to meet with her at the event, he is attacked by two metal lions. They don't seem to be as tough as they look and are easily beaten with the help of Yukina. It turns out that the monsters were actually there to deliver an invitation letter to Kojou. Kojou had been invited to the yacht of the newly arrived representative of the first progenitor named Lord Ardil. To add to the spice, the man had not only invited Kojou, but also asked him to bring a +1. While his first choice would have been Asagi, he cannot let her know of his secret identity, and so is forced to take Yukina with her. At the yacht, Yukina and Kojou are confronted by Ardil and his bodyguard and assistant Sayaka Kirasaka, who turns out to be an old friend of Yukina from the Lion King Academy. Sayaka is a feminist, and not the good kind. She is the kind of feminist who hates all men, and, in this context, she hates Kojou the most. She seems to have some repressed feelings towards Yukina for sure. If you think she is weird, wait till you hear about Ardil. Ardil takes the two inside and reveals that he was in love with the last fourth progenitor, and since Kojou was the new one, he was in love with him too. Now, if that's not sus, I don't know what is. Ardil then comes to the point and discusses the new threat posed by international terrorist Christoph Gardos and his organization. Gardos was probably coming after Ardil since he killed their ex-leader and he wanted Kojou to deal with the threat for him. He blackmails them, explaining that, if he was dead, his familiars would destroy the entire island. Having no other choice, Kojou and Yukina visit Natsuki in her office, learn that Astarte is now employed as her maid, and discuss Vattler, terrorism, and the ancient weapon known as Nalakuvera, which the terrorists are after. However, Natsumi thinks that they should not waste their time searching for the weapon, as no one has ever been able to use it, and no one will probably be able to use it ever as well. Still suspicious that perhaps this weapon has a hidden secret, Kojou goes to Asagi and asks her to research the weapon using her influence at the government office and her hacking skills. All of this is watched by Sayaka, who is enraged, believing that Kojou was juggling two girls at once and betraying her friend Yukina. When Kojou is alone on the roof, an enraged Sayaka confronts and assaults Akatsuki atop the school roof. Just as Kojou releases his powers, Asagi comes in and notices all of this unfold before her. Kojou has no way to control himself and releases the insurmountable powers all around, causing a massive blast that sends waves so strong that the entire school is shaken. Asagi, being a normal human, is blasted off by the impact, but thankfully she isn't hurt that much. Yukina arrives at the scene to stop Sayaka and Kojou from causing further destruction and reprimands them for what they had done, despite it all being Sayaka's fault. Yukina takes Asagi to the school nurse, accompanied by Nagisa, Kojou's sister, where the nurse heals her using the magical ice pack that we all know about. After Asagi regains her consciousness, she confronts Yukina about her relationship with Kojou, but before they can talk further, Astarte, the homunculus, who is now working under Natsuki, appears, stopping their conversation midway. And soon enough, a few demons approach the building. There's always something happening non-stop here, isn't there? The demons quickly approach the room, and it looks like they were not after Kojou, they were after Asagi. When the demons surround the area, they quickly form a circle, apprehending the girls from escaping. From the circle approaches the infamous Christoph Gardos, the terrorist that Ardil had blackmailed Yukina and Kojou to assassinate. Gardos was here to kidnap Asagi, as she was the one who had the skills to decipher the Nalakuvera's weapon. Pretty sure there were tons of experts, but Gardos is an anime villain and knows that high schoolers have the power of plot armor. Gardos then shoots down Astarte before she can be of any issue and kidnaps the three girls. Motoki, a druid and friend of Kojou, who is also a secret follower of the fourth progenitor, he quickly rushes to save the girls, but just as he releases his main power to try and pursue the terrorists, Ardil appears out of nowhere and stops him from doing anything. As expected, Ardil was a sus man who enjoys chaos and wants to add some spice to the anime. The three girls are then thrown into an isolated room where Gardos once again approaches them. Apparently, Asagi had solved a very difficult programming puzzle a few days ago which had piqued Gardos' organization's interest. Gardos reveals that he wanted to kill the first progenitor, and that was only possible if he knew how to use the Nalakuvera. He needed her, or actually wants her, to solve the puzzle of how to use the weapon. Asagi is reluctant to do the task as she knows that the death of any one of the three progenitors would send the world to war and chaos. But it turns out that the puzzle that she solved earlier was already half of the solution to activate the weapon, and without the full solution, the weapon could malfunction and destroy the entire island. Turns out that Ardil had also helped Gardos and his crew, but his motivation was only to get some entertainment out of it. Soon enough, Nalakuvera, which turns out to be a mechanized robot, appears in the street and starts causing havoc. Sayaka and Kojou get to the scene only for the smaller subfloat island to separate from the main one during their battle with the Nalakuvera. Kojou battles the Nalakuvera, and Sayaka joins the fight. However, the Nalakuvera appears to have the upper hand, especially because the Nalakuvera can actually learn from its opponent's attacks and can adapt to the moves. Having no other choice but to launch a full-on attack, Kojou decides to unleash his familiar. When his familiar drives the Nalakuvera into the ground, it causes an earthquake, and Sayaka and Kojou fall through a fissure to a lower level of the now leaking and unstable float. As Asagi works furiously at deciphering the control system for the Nalakuvera, Yukina goes around the base of the terrorist. The shaman stumbles upon a room filled with manufactured Nalakuveras. This was Gardos' ultimate plan, to create an army to wipe the progenitors from the earth. As expected, Gardos makes a villain's entrance and transforms into his demon form to battle with Yukina. The battle rages for a long time, with Gardos and Yukina matching stride for stride. Finally, after some intense moves from both sides, Yukina severs his arm, but is prevented from defeating him by the sudden appearance of two more terrorists who bring with them unconscious Nagisa and Asagi as prisoners. Underground, Sayaka and Kojou are trapped, and take some time to figure out that it was almost impossible for them to get back, and they would probably drown. During their struggle, the two manage to settle their differences, and finally, Sayaka warms up to Kojou. This was a long time coming, by the way. We all knew Sayaka was a major tsundere. After settling their differences, Sayaka offers her blood to Kojou, and with the help of that, he manages to unlock another familiar under his control. With this new power, Kojou and Sayaka manage to get to the ground and re-enter the battle. Gardos takes the Master Nalakuvera and leads the rest of the manufactured ones into the battle. At first, the gang of Nalakuveras at first seems to overpower the crew, and they seem impossible to defeat. After all, Nalakuvera was the weapon of the gods. However, Asagi had revealed that, after decoding the Nalakuvera she had added in, a slight code into the system which could be used to defeat the weapon. She had bugged the Nalakuvera system with a virus, probably Corona, and Yukina takes advantage of all of this. She jumps onto the weapon and throws in the audio file which would activate the virus. Soon enough, the Nalakuvera starts malfunctioning and falls down, turning into dust. Now that there is a bit of normal again, Asagi lures Kojou into the school's art room to get closer to him without any other women nearby. She asks him if she can paint him, and when he hesitates to wear the costume she asked him to, she strips down alongside him to make him feel more secure. Yes, that's the perfect way to convince someone. After the whole picture and arts ordeal, Asagi cheekily asks Kojou out and manages to secure a date for the coming weekend. From afar, Yukina observes, with jealousy, I guess. As Kojou discusses revealing his secret identity to Asagi, although they were just in a literal battle earlier, they witness Nagisa accepting a letter from a classmate. Turns out Kojou's sister was quite popular in the school, unlike him who was a social outcast. Later that night, Sayaka, who now seems to be friendlier with Kojou, calls him and informs him that she will be coming to the island this weekend as a VIP bodyguard. Pretty sure she wanted to meet him during the whole mission, but Kojou, gullible and ignorant as he is, concludes that she might be busy and won't be able to see him or Yukina. Wow, take a hint, dude. Kojou is pretty stressed at school that his sister is more popular and getting love letters left and right, so he stalks his sister at school along with Yukina and is introduced to a classmate of hers, the silver-haired Canon Kanase. Despite her pretty awesome looks, the girl has a pretty sus habit. She collects feral cats in some nearby church ruins. Elsewhere, Natsuki and Motoki discuss the recovering victim from a recent aerial battle. Apparently, some weird white-haired demon had been going around attacking people, and this was the 5th attack on ordinary humans. They believed that the demon was stealing something from the victims, but they were not quite sure. Once again, Adrenal approaches from the shadows. He does this quite a lot and informs them that the demon was actually stealing its victims' souls. The sus man promises to reveal more details, provided that Kojou was not involved in the case. Elsewhere, Kojou and Yukina accompany Natsuki and Astarte to a festival, which was actually a plan that Natsuki had created so that they could catch the recently appearing demons. Natsuki had planned to use the fireworks to create a distraction and fight the demons. They move to the tower where they anticipate another battle between the flying humanoids who they seek to capture. During the battle, they discover that their magic is ineffective against the flyers, who seem to have the upper hand at all times. When one of the demons attacks Kojou, however, the other silver-haired flyer saves him and brutally assaults the first. She apparently has no chill and shows no mercy. While absolutely thrashing the other demon, her mask is destroyed, revealing that she is Canon. Kojou and the others watch in horror as Canon kills her and drinks her blood. The next day, in order to investigate the matter further, Kojou and Yukina visit Magnus Craft, the company run by Canon's father. Conveniently so, the man is off-site, but his secretary Beatrice has the pair flown to a research island the company owns nearby. Pretty sure that she is leading them into a trap, but they go with her anyway, only for the pilot Lo to quickly strand them there. Told you it was a trap. Back in the city, wondering about Canon Kanase, Sayaka investigates the church ruins and encounters Motoki, who she recalls seeing with the sus guy Adriel. They get into a bit of a banter and are soon joined moments later by Nagisa and Asagi. Asagi and Sayaka have some old matters to clear, back when Sayaka attacked Kojou. After finishing with their drama, all of them head to a nearby internet cafe where Asagi uses her skills to track down the whereabouts of Kojou and Yukina. At the island, Kojou and Yukina have made a Bear Grylls-styled settlement and have prepared well for spending the night at the island, as there is little hope that they will be rescued soon. When the night finally arrives, Yukina is nowhere to be seen, however, so Kojou heads out to look for her. I'd ask why he isn't scared, but then he is a literal immortal vampire, so why would he be? As Kojou enters deep into the forest, he soon comes across a moonlit pool, and in that pool, he notices a silver-haired beauty. We can't show her though because she is completely naked, but trust me when I say she looks just like Canon. Kojou blinks his eyes once to see if it was a dream, and just like that, the woman disappears. Instead, a spear falls on his back. It was Yukina, who was also bathing there and knows that Kojou is a pervert. He hands her his jacket, although if she came here on her own, wouldn't she have her clothes with her? As the two look around for the Canon clone that Kojou saw earlier, a hovercraft approaches the island and beaches. A squad of robot soldiers disembarks and immediately attacks Kojou and Yukina. The craft was sent by Magus Craft. Canon's father seems to be involved with all this. The two manage to fight off some of the robots, but are soon surrounded. Fear not, because due to what we call plot armor, our heroes are saved when they are rescued by La Folia Rehavian, the woman Kojou had seen bathing. After La Folia finishes most of the robots, Kojou destroys the remaining soldiers and their landing craft. La Folia reveals that Magnus Craft was after the royal blood in her for some reason and had probably come here to get her. Turns out that her blood was needed so that Kenzi Kanase, Kanon's father, can perform his spells, which is why he wanted her captured. Soon enough, another hovercraft beaches, waving a flag of truce, and Kanon's adoptive father, Kensei Kanase, greets them, accompanied by Beatrice and Lo. The trio reveals their plans that they were developing Kanon into what Kensei terms an angel, a supreme monster with incredible power against her will. In order to become the angel, she had to consume the other humanoid monsters, which is why earlier they were fighting like crazy in the sky. They demand the blood from La Folia so that they can make further advancements to Kanon, whom they carry around like a gun in their briefcase. The group also plans to use Kanon to kill Kojou so that they could later sell her as the weapon that can even kill the world's most powerful vampire. Soon a fight breaks out between the group, and when Kojou and his crew gain the upper hand, the villains release Kanon. She immediately releases a powerful beam that appears to have killed Kojou with a single strike. The sight of Kojou's death disrupts Kanon's mental state unpredictably, and she creates a tower of ice around herself. Elsewhere, not far from the island, Sayaka assaults and takes control of a Magus craft after slaughtering all the robot soldiers guarding the ship, and is joined on it by Natsuki, who had been searching for La Folia. The two decide to head to the island to rescue their friends. Curled up into a ball, Kanon agonizes about what she had done while encased in ice at the top of her self-imposed barrier. Using the same tower of ice, Yukina has created a magical shelter for herself, La Folia, and a lifeless Kojou. In order to bring Kojou back to life, La Folia comes up with a plan and strips all the way down, despite the cold, mind you. She believes that arousing Kojou could invoke his vampiric urges and bring him back. Yukina, who can't seem to let any other girl near the fourth progenitor, strips down herself and kisses Kojou until suddenly the vampire comes back to life and starts sucking her blood. Soon, with the blood's help, a familiar inside of Kojou heals the wounds he had incurred in the last battle and returns Kojou to consciousness. Inspired by this display, and perhaps wanting to add more complications to Kojou's life, La Folia gives herself to Kojou and lets him feed on her as well. This finally gains Kojou control over a third familiar. I'm not really sure how this works until now, but Kojou has a new power now. With this power, he confronts the patiently waiting Kensei. At first, Kojou and his group try to use Naruto's Talk no Jutsu to make a deal with Kenzi and turn him to the good side, but it's no use, and soon once more, a battle breaks out. Turns out that Beatrice had cloned the angels without Kenzi's approval and unleashes them on the progenitor and his group, only to be absolutely thrashed. Then, with the new familiar that Kojou just unlocked, he manages to separate Kanon from the spiritual energy of the angel and saves her from becoming a mindless demon. Just as the battle is over, Sayaka and Natsuki arrive at the scene to rescue their friends from the island. Sayaka decides to help La Folia return back to her home country. Now that the threat to her, and her blood especially, was gone, all the others return back to the Itogami Island to their normal lives. A few weeks later, and the Halloween weekend is about to arrive. As Yukina and Kojou travel in a packed train discussing their imminent holiday, Kojou gets caught by his teachers, Sasasaki and Natsuki, who believe him to be a molester. Natsuki, however, clears him off the charges after realizing that it's him and lets them go. Elsewhere, two witches appear by the port of the island and start attacking the defending forces with several spells, and realize that even after coming back here 10 years later, they were still too badass for the security to handle them. The soldiers recognize the two women as the Witches of Ashdown, who are members of the criminal organization known as the Library. Back in the city, Kojou is surprisingly visited by his childhood friend Yuuma, who had visited him almost after 4 years. The tomboyish girl adds a bit of a dynamic to the love triangle that's already secretly going on between Asagi, Kojou, and Yukina. Since Yuuma had visited him after so long, Kojou spends a lot of time with her and takes her along with his friends to a tower for sightseeing. As they enjoy the view, Kojou receives a call from Sayaka explaining how some weird things were happening all around the island. For some reason, all doors were leading people from their desired place to another one in an instant. Sayaka and La Folia, who planned to go to the airport, were transported to the other side of the island after entering a door in the airport. Realizing the danger that was surrounding the island and wanting to protect Nagisa and Yuume from all of this chaos, Kojou decides not to get involved with the issue and stays back home with his friend and his sister. Later that night, when Yuume and Kojou are alone, Yuume starts acting like she had a crush on Kojou and even tells him that he was the perfect one for her. Then, taking the opportunity, she quickly gives him a kiss. Man, I wish I had confidence like that. Just as she kisses him, Kojou's eyes start getting blurred and he falls down asleep. A few moments later, when Kojou awakens, he finds that he was actually in Yuume's body and his own body was nowhere to be seen. Quickly, with nowhere else to go, he goes next door to Yukina's apartment to convince her of what had happened to him. He is invited into a room where all of the other girls are pretty chill and do not care what they are wearing, believing him to be a girl. Elsewhere, the island's communications and transportation are in disarray, and Asagi looks into the situation to find that there was no cyber attack happening at the moment. She contacts her colleague, Tank Driver, yes, that's his name apparently, to understand what exactly was happening on the island. As the two discuss different possibilities, Mogwai, the AI that Asagi had created, connects the current spatial anomaly to a past crisis known as the Dark Oath Grimoire incident, perpetrated by the library a decade ago. Back at Yukina's apartment, unable to bear the ladies' indecencies, Kojou announces his true identity. The girls then sit him down and start asking him several questions to confirm his identity. After confirming his identity, they ask him what exactly had happened, and he reveals all the details from earlier, including the kiss that pisses off half of the women population there. Yukina concludes that Yuuma is to blame for all that had happened, and she believes that all of this was somewhat a plan that Yuuma had created. Kojou, however, argues that vampires can't be rid of their eternal curse, which meant that their bodies couldn't be exchanged, so Yuume couldn't have possibly taken her body. But Yukina thinks that perhaps space distortion was how his body was stolen. This just meant one thing: Yuume was a witch, just like and as powerful as Natsuki, who could use space distortion magic. The Ashdown witches lurk with a grimoire atop the Keystone Gate Tower until interrupted by Ardeel. As the witches try to attack Ardeel and make him bow to them, Yuuma arrives in Kojou's body and stops them. She introduces herself to a confused Ardeel as the daughter of the Witch of Notoria. She proposes a deal with Ardeel to release her imprisoned mother, who had been kept in the island's magical high-security prison. She explains that she had stolen Kojou's body so that she could use his power and free her mother, and requests that he doesn't get involved with her plan in any way, neither with nor against it. In turn for all this, she would also release countless powerful monsters and demons whom he could fight and make his life more fun like he always wanted to. Elsewhere, Kojou and Yukina manage to find the witches on the tower and quickly head to the scene, but the transportation anomaly makes it so that they cannot enter the place and instead are transported to a girls' changing room at all times. This all kind of feels a bit weird if you ask me. Fortunately, Asagi solves most of the island's navigational issues and quickly develops a satellite-based navigation system phone app which is sent to Kojou, enabling Yukina and him to travel to the tower to confront the witches. When Kojou and Yukina reach the top of the tower, they notice the skies darken and the whole area filled with dark tentacles of some weird monster. Ardeel is still there as well and casually explains the plan that Yuume had set out to achieve. With Kojou's body, she was going to release the barrier to the prison and release all the powerful monsters as well as her mother. After explaining the plot, Ardeel vanishes like a coward while the other witches take Kojou and Yukina captive. Soon enough, Sayaka and La Foila manage to arrive at the place by sheer luck and rescue the two from the witches' clutches. As the group is involved in the battle, Yuuma uses the grimoire book to bring the interdimensional prison to the regular human plane. As soon as the prison appears, Yuuma disappears from the scene and heads to the prison, so, in order to stop her, Kojou and Yukina pursue her while Sayaka and La Foila remain back to deal with the witches. Yuume, who now has control over most of Kojou's powers, uses it to release one of his familiars, who brings the prison entirely into this plane. Just as Kojou and Yukina reach Yuume and follow her into the prison, they notice that, at the center of the room, Natsuki, their teacher, and the Witch of the Void, was sitting there asleep. Yuume reveals that only killing Natsuki would cause the barrier to break and allow the prisoners of the prison to escape. A battle soon ensues between Yukina and Yuume, which ends with Yukina putting her spear through Yuume's spiritual guardian, and also through her. This somehow breaks the curse, and Kojou and Yukina return back to their own bodies, and Natsuki wakes up as well. Like all anime stories, Yuume, who was pretty much a villain a few seconds ago, regrets her actions, and so they just let her go. Her friends, the witches, however, are taken into custody. Just then, out of nowhere, Yuume's spiritual guardian takes up its sword and slices right through Yuume as well as Natsuki, who immediately falls to the floor. Outside the prison, Ardil appears and is pissed that the plans didn't work. He decides that he would use his own powers to break the prison barrier when suddenly Nagisa, Kojou's sister, who looks to be possessed by the 12th familiar, appears out of nowhere and beats the crap out of him. She gives the man a formal warning of sorts to stay away from Kojou and leaves. Back at the prison, Yuume's wish apparently came true when she didn't want it to happen, as her mother appears from within the depths of the prison. The woman looks way too young to be Yuume's mother, though, and explains that she had birthed Yuume from a weird lab process just like a clone, but not exactly the same. In other words, the two women were actually the same person, with the Witch of Norokia being the original and Yuume being her copy. Since she was the original, the witch proceeds to rip Yuume's spiritual guardian away from her right in front of everyone else. Holding up another grimoire, she explains to Kojou and Yukina how she cursed Natsuki, which partially opened the prison. She had stolen the Witch of the Void's memories and everything that she had experienced, making her useless as long as the curse held true. This made her the Witch of the Void, and if anyone attacked her, the barrier of the prison would also get damaged. With the barrier weakened, 6 of the most dangerous criminals escaped the prison, and all they had to do was kill Natsuki, who appears to have vanished somewhere. Why only 6 prisoners, you ask? Well, the barrier was only partially open, so only the best with the greatest of health and stamina could actually get out unscathed. Elsewhere, after waking from her nap, Asagi walks the streets during the festival where she acquires guardianship of a small child who can only be Natsuki. I mean, who else could that be? It's so uncanny. Unwilling to leave a literal child in the middle of the streets, Asagi takes her in and takes care of her. Back at the prison, the prisoners are tempted to attack Kojou and his injured group, but just then Sayaka comes in, racing on a tank cart, and all of them escape before being attacked. Kojou then takes his friends to his mother's place, hoping that she can help them as she is a doctor. Kojou's mother, Mimori, however, is pretty weird, just like most of the characters in this anime. Why do I call her that, you ask? Well, she feels up Yuume's chest so that she can help her with her stomach wound. That's why. Kojou, on the other hand, has his own set of problems as Sayaka wants to offer herself to him in a situation like this. As I said earlier, almost all of these guys are weird. The Witch of Notoria then heads to the top of the school, where Natsuki teaches and is confronted by 2 members of her organization, the library. The men ask her to return back to the organization since she was now free, but instead of going back, the witch severs her ties with the organization and brutally kills the 2 men. Back at the lab, the group realizes that, since Yuume was not only stabbed but also revoked of her familiar, aka spirit guardian, there was no research on the topic, and no normal treatment could heal her. She needed someone with immense magical skill, someone like Natsuki who could help her out. While discussing Natsuki, who they believe can save Yuuma, they notice Asagi with a small child on TV and phone her. The call is interrupted by one of the 6 prisoners, Kirika Girika, who has realized that the girl is the young Witch of the Void. The man starts chasing the 2 girls, but thankfully, with the help of Mogwai, they manage to escape the guy and escape to an entrance of the Keystone Gate. The lean convict follows the 2 there as well, but here, the island and Astarte come to the girl's rescue and apprehend the man, taking him back to the prison cell where he belonged. Their troubles are not over yet though, as another convict called Gigliola Gherardi appears and takes mind control of the Island Guard detachment, subdues Astarte, and menaces Asagi and Natsuki-chan. This time though, Ardil appears and battles with her for the sheer need of enjoyment. He always enjoys a good battle and is overjoyed that he can use his main familiar against her. The battle, however, ends up quick and leads to the brutal suffering of Gigliola before she is sent back to her cell. Kojou arrives to the scene a bit too late, but is glad that his friends are okay. Ardil then offers a deal. He would guard Natsuki's child form in his boat provided that Kojou comes there as well. The man was still not done with his sus moves, but this was a good plan and Kojou agrees to it. Aboard Ardil's yacht, circumstances compel Kojou into the luxurious baths where he is approached by a ton of women who just can't wait to have a piece of him. They're all scared off by Asagi and Natsuki, however, and the two then take a bath with Kojou instead. Apparently, that's a casual thing in Japan. I don't know. That night in their room, the two teens continue to bicker. The sleeping child suddenly stands on the bed and identifies herself as Natsukyun, revealing that Natsuki will magically restore herself in 2 hours. However, since the body was not of actual Natsuki, the whole turning back thing was not a good idea, and would probably kill her, and only destroying the Witch of Notoria's grimoire could restore her back fully. On the quay outside, Ardil approaches Sayaka and Yukina, who had just arrived there after being notified by Kojou of his location, when suddenly the prisoner Brute Dumblegraph interrupts their casual anime chatting moment. The man proves to be quite the strong opponent and matches every one of Ardil's blows with his own, but Ardil soon has had enough and manages to subdue and imprison the convict after a long and hard battle. Another prisoner, Shutora D, appears, only to be similarly reincarcerated by Sayaka this time. Back at the school rooftop, the Witch of Notoria has cast a huge spell and, with her preparations complete, Aya appears and claims Itogami Island, and, with the Dark Oath grimoire, declares an end to any supernatural powers other than her own. She appears before Kojou and his group and witnesses as all of their magic is drained and they are reduced to mere humans. For some reason, however, Yukina proves the exception, but when she attacks, she's teleported into a jail cage. See you on Part 4! If you enjoyed the series, don't forget to leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching! Part 4 continues when the Witch of the Notoria, Aya, and Yukina are seen in the dream world. Aya shows Yukina the memories of Natsuki from 10 years ago. Meanwhile, Sayako takes care of Kojou. Nothing is working, so Sayaka offers her blood. Her period blood, to be exact. Yuuma also arrives just then, completely injured but recovering from before. Yukina continues to dream about a nice slice of life anime with Sayaka and Kojou. All seems well, but Yukina realizes she's in a dream and she ends the genjutsu. She wakes up in her cage. Meanwhile, Yuuma also gives her blood to Kojou. Both of them get horny. Kojou bites her and takes her blood. Then he forces himself on Sayaka and takes her blood as well. Despite being forced on, Sayaka allows it to happen. Once Kojou regains his powers, he releases his fourth familiar. The whole island is covered in mist. Meanwhile, Aya starts monologuing about her desire to prove that witches are actually innocent. For that, she'll hurt more people. Really counterproductive, to be honest. She asks Yukina to join her in his noble cause. Suddenly, Kojou releases his third familiar and attacks Aya. Then he frees Yukina from her cage. So, Aya re-releases the worst criminals that she has power over. The 6 criminals return, but Kojou quickly defeats them this time. Yukina also shatters Aya's magical barrier, but Aya summons some tentacles and tries to go tentacle hentai on her. Thankfully, Yukina saves herself. Aya pulls out her grimoire to take the upper hand, but Natsuki was waiting for this. She uses her magic to take the book from Aya. In doing so, she acquires her lost time and powers. Aya is near defeat, but she feeds her soul to a demon, and as a result, she becomes a demon herself. So, they all work together and they finally defeat her. Meanwhile, convict Meiga steals a prototype anti-demon lance just like Yukina's. In search of an artifact known as Wiseman's Blood that Kensei Kanase has in his custody, alchemist Ku Amatsuka attacks his facility and visits him. Kensei has no intentions of helping him, so they get into a fight. The group will be going to a training camp away from the island. For that, they go shopping at the mall. Kojou is also traveling with them to be their personal shopping bag carrier. Suddenly, he is attacked by Ku. Ku wants to offer Cannon as a sacrifice for some ritual. Ku makes a comment regarding an occurrence that happened at Nina Adelard's monastery 5 years ago. Yukina also joins the fight and cuts his arm, but Ku uses metal to regain his arm, proving that he's kinda like the Full Metal Alchemist. Despite being confident, he leaves for now, as all anime villains do. Kojou goes to Natsuki to report the incident. He is met by Astarte, who gives him a detailed Wikipedia explanation about alchemists and their desire to reach godhood. She also mentions the legendary Nina Adelard and Wiseman, 2 alchemists who are said to have reached that level and would be centuries old now. Kojou and Asagi decide to go to Nina Adelard's monastery, but Natsuki stops them. In the process, Asagi loses a priceless ear stud. Natsuki tells them that Kensei was attacked by Ku some time ago. They decide to take care of Kanon even more. Yukina takes Kojou to a shady area of the city where the island branch of the Lion Kings is hidden. Yukina's teacher appears as a cat familiar and greets them. On meeting her, Yukina surrenders her halberd to her. Meanwhile, Ku performs a ritual in the demolished chapel using Wiseman's blood to drive his former mentor Nina out. Outside the monastery, Asagi goes looking for her missing earrings. She calls Kojou to help her. Inside the monastery, Nina is released and she consumes a human to regain her old form. Asagi, who is outside, is seen by Ku, who cuts her. While she starts dying, Kojou yells on the phone. Kojou and the others arrive at the place. When he sees Asagi dead, he loses control, but Yukina calms him down. Ku arrives just then and starts gloating. Kojou and Yukina immediately fight him, but Ku gets rid of his human form and takes the form of Wiseman's blood. They somehow manage to defeat him. Suddenly, Asagi wakes up. She is well and alive, despite being covered in blood. She does not seem to be hurt at all. Since she can't go home covered in blood, Kojou takes her home where Nagisa takes care of her. As she is showering, Asagi sees a red mark on her chest, which she touches. Doing so causes the ancient alchemist Nina Adelard to take over her body. Nina walks around the house naked, causing Kojou to donate blood to the carpet. Nina covers herself up and reveals everything about herself to Kojou, who thanks her for saving Asagi's life. Meanwhile, Ku has survived his battle, and he's walking around town. But Natsuki faces him and beats him easily. He releases a black ball, which she takes. Elsewhere, Nina says that she'll get out of Asagi's body once she gets Wiseman's blood. They sit down for dinner, and Yukina also joins them. The next day, the girls leave for their training camp while Kojou stays back home. Nina senses Wiseman's blood moving around the city. Turns out, Ku didn't actually die at Natsuki's hands. Ku goes around in his terrible liquid form while all the humans try to stop him. They use liquid nitrogen to stop him for now, but, surprise surprise, turns out Ku is still in his normal human form. The liquid is actually called Wiseman's blood. They destroy the place and escape into the sea for now. Meanwhile, the girls are on their training cruise when they sense something strange coming from the water. Ku goes on the ferry and attacks the people there using his alchemy powers. Meanwhile, Nina and Kojou visit the ruined church where they find the bones of humans killed by Wiseman's blood. She also finds little bits of Wiseman's blood, so she takes it. She uses it to regain some of her powers. Back at the ferry, Ku is looking for Kanon to complete some ritual. She runs away while Yukina tries to hold him back. Kojou and Nina get ready to get on an airship that is provided to them by La Folia. Before they can enter, Yukina's teacher, the cat, comes and gives them Yukina's halberd to pass to her. Meanwhile, Ku corners Kanon and gets ready to attack her, but she talks about how she remembers him and how tragic his life has been. Ku cannot bear the truth, so he jumps in, but Yukina saves her with a small knife. When Ku creates shadow clones to kill them, Kojou and Nina arrive on the special aircraft. They stop Ku and give Yukina's halberd back to her. They start dominating Ku, so Ku takes out Wiseman's golden skull and throws it to the deck. Meanwhile, Wiseman's blood goes into the seawater to absorb any necessary materials from the sea. Once the required materials are obtained, Wiseman turns into a giant golden being and he attacks them. But Kojou releases his powers and blocks the attacks. Everyone is saved, but Kojou is turned into solid metal. Since he's not technically dead, he can't come back to life. Yukina starts crying over him. Suddenly, Nagisa gets possessed by Aurora again. Aurora uses Nagisa to kiss her own brother. Ew. Okay, I know. Kojou gets his powers back. Yukina also offers herself to Kojou, who drinks her blood again. Now that he has a lot of powers, he gets ready to beat up Wiseman. Kojou summons every single one of his familiars for that purpose. Meanwhile, Yukina uses her halberd to defeat Ku, who finally realizes that he was in the wrong. But Wiseman is still strong because he has become a perfect being using his alchemy powers. So Kojou releases his 11th familiar, which is a bodacious woman. The 11th familiar grabs Wiseman and disintegrates him to nothingness. Nina is freed up from her connection to Wiseman and she regains her real body, but she could not get all the blood, so she is a small size for now. Yukina wakes up with tears in her eyes when she imagines Kojou leaving him. Maybe she really does love him. Later at school, Yukina is changing in the locker room when a naked figure appears full-on Terminator style. The girl who looks just like Yukina attacks Yukina and then takes her clothes. Meanwhile, Lord Ardeal goes to a place that has been damaged terribly. He tells Sayaka that the dragon below their island is starting to move. Back at school, the mysterious person who looks just like Yukina runs into Kojou and Yaazi. She acts strangely in front of them, attracting Kojou's attention. She takes another step forward and treats Natsuki like a little girl. Natsuki immediately suspects something and grabs her breasts. Natsuki does not say anything for now. Then, the girl runs away while Kojou runs after her. Back at the destroyed place, a giant dragon appears out of the hole. Lord Ardeal laughs with excitement like a maniac. Kojou confronts the girl when he realizes that she's not Yukina. The real Yukina also appears with new clothes and her halberd, ready to murder the ish out of her. But their argument is disturbed by the appearance of the dragon from earlier. So, Natsuki creates a dimension-controlling space around them. But suddenly, the dragon uses a portal to impale the strange girl. Then, it grabs Kojou and takes a lot of his powers before he can release himself. The dragon tries to attack Yukina using the same tactics, but she fights back. Since Kojou is weak from having his powers drained, the dragon attacks him, but Yukina fights the dragon, and in the process, her powerful halberd breaks. Just as the dragon attacks her, the strange girl from earlier wakes up. She uses her own familiar to stop the dragon. Turns out, she's also an immortal vampire, just like Kojou. She says she followed the dragon all the way here to stop him. Natsuki appears just then and takes responsibility for the new girl. The real Yukina is extremely depressed because her halberd broke. That night, the Lion King organization commands Yukina to return, which results in her being even more depressed. Later, the girl bathes with the girls and tells them about the dragon. Apparently, it's a man-made magical beast. It can distort time and space, and it will eat the magical veins which support their island. If that continues, then this island will sink. Asagi and her company also find out about the fluctuating energy levels. Later, reveals that she has been called by the Lion King organization. She is super sad, but does not show it. Kojou does not do anything. So, Sayaka slaps him to his senses, and he goes to help Yukina because she helped him so many times by giving him her blood. On the way, he sees the dragon eating the magic of the island and also dominating the defense system. Asagi calls him and says that they have 30 hours before the island sinks. And then, the phone lines go out. The mysterious girl goes to Yukina to help her. She says motivational lines and then she uses her own magic to give her a new weapon. Elsewhere, Kojou uses her familiar to fight the dragon, but it's too powerful for him. So Natsuki and Astarte join the fight. They beat the dragon, but it comes back to life again. When Kojou uses his familiar against it, the dragon steals his powers again. So Lord Ardeal comes and gets ready to go all out against the dragon. But he says that the island will get destroyed if they fight all out, so Yukina stops him for now. Turns out, the Lion King organization created this new halberd for Yukina which took 20 years to make. She stops the dragon for a while, then she offers her neck to Kojou. He jumps in like a hungry man at a buffet, and thus he gets a power-up. Then, Kojou, Yukina, and the girl combine their forces to beat the dragon so hard that it stops eating the island's magic. The island is saved. When they recover, Sayaka tells Yukina that she was not called back permanently. It was just for a regular medical checkup, and Sayaka also got a similar command. Now that the dragon is dead, the girl leaves. Before leaving, she calls Yukina Mother. Both Yukina and Kojou are confused, because, on top of that, the girl was a vampire, implying that Kojou and Yukina do it sometime in the future. In the far future, 20 years from now, the girl returns to the time period that she came from. She goes to look out at the island, which has now grown even larger into an empire called the Empire of the Dawn.